Welcome everyone to day 5. We've got that far that we've re-extended our contract to day 5. Thank you very much everyone who supported this show so far. You had an absolute mammoth event yesterday that rivaled the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but back in his usual seat is Mr. Lecdog. Lecdog, how the bloody hell are you?
I'm well, mate. It was nice to catch up. I caught up and I watched the VOD. I thought Damo did a particularly good job. We love Damo. It was a great addition. It was about 7.5 hours too long, but other than that, I thought it was a great show, mate. I broke it up across the last sort of 48 hours. I've just finished. I've just got there in time, but no, I'm pumped, mate.
I did say to Damo, it'll be a max an hour. Should rattle it off. And 2 hours, 20 minutes later, Damo was sat there, God bless him. But I mean, this is the first day of free agency. So we should have some crocodile done deals to do. Thank you very much to Dave. We love your support. Thank you, Brandon, Paul, Chills, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and Faz. Talk about West Ham, you cowards. Well, we'll try. But James Jordan. Interesting story about James Jordan. Actually, I'll share it with the group because I'm not embarrassed. But when I was doing this sheet, it took me about an hour to find James Jordan's name because I thought it was spelt the proper way, AN. And I ended up emailing Champ Starter to complain that the search engine was broken. And Lecdog has made me look like an idiot because he texted me saying, Pom Jordan spelt wrong, but James Jordan has requested a trade in the free agency. Finally, we have a done deal. 18 games this year for the D's, 13.1 on the wing, 2.4 inside 50s, score involvements just under 4, 0.2 goals. Looks like the AFL have said currently at this stage the compensation pick is 39, which will be about 44 come the draft. Pretty good deal this, isn't it, really? I mean, it's a good deal all round.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, actually, I retired from caring about compensation picks today on Twitter officially. I don't care and I won't complain. But geez, to get pick in the mid 40s for a guy who was going to leave anyways, pretty bloody good dealing for Melbourne. And I think we talked about it when we previewed Sydney earlier in the week. What was that last week? I can't remember. We've been doing that was in our bumper show last week when we did a 2-hour show. We talked about Sydney and we said that James Jordan would be a potential target for them. So he brings them a bit of outside depth because they're going to lose Dylan Stevens, Matt Roberts. Not sure how much he was there. But he could also go inside, which we know with Callum Mills getting injured, you're going to need someone to be some bodies in there. So I quite like him as a fit. I don't think he's 100% solves all of their problems, but I think he's probably an upgrade on who they've had running through there this year.
Sydney are really the Audi of the AFL trade period because they've been linked with some non-brand names. Do you know what I mean? Which could be as good as the real ones. Luca, this is a great question. You know I've got an aversion to two first names. Now, we talk about the loophole that I have. I have an S at the end of my name. So that's one of the loopholes. I might have to count just misspelling your surname as a loophole as well. So there we are. I mean, I learned something this week. But I agree with you, Lecdog. It's a fairly bland trade. I agree with you, though, about the compensation picks. Let's just say there is a world that exists where we don't have a mythical rule. Do you think they would have got more or less? Chat as well, answer this. Do you think they would have got more or less than 39?
If they had to trade him, they'd probably have gotten less, I think. I don't think a lot of players move for second rounds, especially fringe players, especially guys that are sub-affected. So they're probably better off getting compensation from the AFL, which is ironic, really, because that's not what it's supposed to be. But I've retired from complaining about that, so it's fine. I think it's the perfect deal, and the AFL has no issues, and they're perfect in all of their decisions.
You know, we've broken leg, dog. 39. Yeah, I mean, I think it's about his money. I think it's about his money. I agree with Dame. I think it would have been a bit less. Around the same. I'm with Owen. I think it would have been a bit less than this. I would also say, do you reckon that the deal would be as straightforward? In what I mean is, do you think, let's just say, Sydney had to trade for this. Do you think Sydney would have been as interested for that fee than sniffing around someone like Dersma?
No, I think if they couldn't get him for free, I think it's a different discussion, because it changes the value of the player to the club. Like, well, if we're going to have to give up a second or a third, we may as well actually do a proper shop of guys who are out of contract or in the last years of their contract, not just look at free agents. But I think that's one of the luxuries of free agency, is that because you don't have to give up anything except salary, you're willing to take a little bit less of a player. But I also think James Jordan's underrated because he's been so sub-affected. So you look at his numbers and you can't really buy into them. What is interesting, I'll bore you for a little bit, Pom, just for a minute. I've got a database full of every free agent that's ever left. You want to know how many have actually ever really done anything when they've left? Well, there's been 7 premierships won by players who've left free agency, and then players who have won a BNF, a premiership, or like a Coleman medal. There's only been 14 players that have actually done anything when they left. So for the most part, free agents are these sort of players. They're these mid-tier players that go to clubs and probably get overpaid a little to go there. Like, historically, your free agency players don't have a super long career after this. And I think he fits into that, right? He's just kind of an average player. And because they don't have to give up anything for him, he'll play. If he doesn't, if after a couple of years he falls out of the rotation or out of the team, it's no love lost, really. So I think it's smart.
Well, I mean, Owen's a good judge. He's a Melbourne boy. I think he's right. I think Passenger is harsh, but I see what he means. He's definitely a role player. Lachyjack, our good friend, he asked, what's he meet? I would say he meets that outside run. We discussed that last week. But I also think he meets a very interesting list management role. Sydney are the number 1 side in the league with names you would find in a 17th century novel. They've got Errol, Golden. Do you know what I mean? Like that's an old name. But James Jordan, I think, just plucks up the 21st century first names. James, a stout name, and Jordan, everyone's spelling good old English names wrong. So probably suits that criteria.
Yeah, no, 100%. They've got Hugo Hall Cahan as well as a bit of a name there. I agree with Owen that he's a role player, and that's fine. And the role that he does fill, I think it was Lachyjack that asked that. They're not that deep on the outside. And with Callum Mills missing a chunk of next year, Luke Parker aging, they also need guys that are going to be capable of going inside and outside, and he feels that. And they'll look to improve it again as the off-season goes on and as they go to the draft and stuff. Angus Sheldrick might jump up a bit more next year, but he's just a really solid sort of chuck him in your team. He's the Jack Nunes of Carlton from a couple of years ago, where it's like he's not amazing, but he'll chuck in and he'll give you a 6.5 out of 10 every game. So, and I think that's important. You need that in your team.
You need Jack Nunes. Well, I mean, then we've got another deal that is pretty much a crocodile done deal, and that is Matty Flynn. Finally, we can finally say Ruckman are intelligent because he chose the right club. He chose the right club. 9 games this year, 11.8 touches, 28.4 hit-outs, 3.7 clearances. Fairly solid year. Was probably one of them players that if GWS didn't have, they wouldn't have had the year they had. So probably a real key pillar to what they've done. 26 years old. He's coming into the prime. He's come to this They reckon the comp picks around that 40 mark, which is what? End of second round, loosely, mid third.
End of second, and it'll bump out to 45, 46.
And a pretty good pickup for them. I think this presents a problem, though, because this makes Harry Bennett, who they really do rate at the Eagles. And there was a lot of Victorian clubs sniffing around old Benetton in the draft. Do you reckon this could be one of them ones we haven't heard anything about, but Harry Bennett explores his options?
Potentially. I think he's probably just a couple of years off still. I just think it takes time to develop, and it might be one of those ones where he develops at West Coast, but then, like Flynn, moves and someone else reaps the benefit of him. What they do have, and I've had a few people West Coast fans seem to be split on, well, I wanted Bailey Williams to be the ruckman. Why are we bringing in Matt Flynn? But it looks like that, and if you listen to what West Coast is saying, Matt Flynn's going to be the ruck. Bailey Williams is going to be, if you're talking in Carlton parlance, he's going to be the TDK, the ruck forward. What I'm interested in, Pom, I'm looking at their talls, or their taller forwards. Jack Darling, Oscar Allen, Bailey Williams, Jake Waterman, Ryan Marriage. They're all guys who have been playing, and they probably can't play them all. Probably can't play them all in the same forward line. So I'm interested to see if Matt Flynn is the number one ruck, Bailey Williams has to play. What happens to these other guys? You and I have discussed it, and I don't think this will happen, but they should trade Jack Darling. And that's sort of a flow-on effect from getting in a Matt Flynn, which I think is a very smart signing.
Be interesting. I mean, it'll be an interesting one. I do think West Coast are in that situation where a lot of their older players have probably got value elsewhere for teams looking to make a challenge now, and it allows them just to do what Hawthorn do. I do think Hawthorn have had the best rebuild year one of it, granted, but they've just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, let's get it going. And I think some teams are too chicken shit, for the want of a better word. Luke is going to become our favourite chat member. Yeah, it's preaching.
No. I've retired from talking about that. Why shouldn't you get a free pick for your player who's not contracted to you and is a free agent, and he's exercising his right as a free agent to move clubs? Why shouldn't you get something in return?
You've pinned him down and you've made him leave. Why 9 games? He was a bit of a late bloomer, Matt Flynn. And, Matt Flynn, I think there's something interesting about Matt Flynn. Is he looks like the kind of guy in year 9 could buy alcohol.
Yeah. He's he's 26. He was an academy pick for GWS. He had injuries on and off. They had Shane Mumford. He never really got a chance. Then finally he got into the team, and they played Briggs at the same time. I think it was the end of last year, potentially the end of the year before. And Briggs was almost playing full back at times because they thought Flynn was going to be the ruckman. Anyway, Briggs gets in this year, dominates. The next Mac's gone, big Kieran Briggs, and Flynn's just out. So it's purely been just circumstances that have kept him out. But he's certainly got good ruck craft. He can accumulate the ball. He's got relatively good disposal efficiency for a player of that. And I know we don't like disposal efficiency, but he doesn't tend to fuck up with it when he gets the ball. So, I really like him as a player. It's just hasn't had the opportunity to play. But 26, so he's still got plenty of years left.
You're all like my kids, Lachyjack. That's why I said one of my favourites. I tell my kids one of them's my favourite as well. Don't have favourites. I just have likes. But yeah, Matt Flynn, I agree with you. Pretty good deal. And overnight, actually, while we were on air yesterday, which isn't really much of a claim to fame because me and Damo were pretty much on air about as much as News 24 yesterday. Zac Fisher officially requests a trade to North Melbourne Football Club, 25 years of age, 175 centimetres, 76 kegs, maybe a bit more because he's doing them alcohol adverts at the moment. Interesting little note, Champ Starter now officially list him as a defender, because he played 12 games, 20.8 disposals, 1.3 tackles, 2.1 rebound 50s, and 4.2 score involvements, which does have him in the upper echelon of players who've played that role. The pick at the moment is Carlton have asked for a second. Now, I wanted to talk about this because I've seen it not just from Carlton fans. I've seen it from a lot of people today when I was doing research and looking at trade gossip. They get excited because a second is 19, right?
Yeah,
But they don't realise that it's 19 to 36. So that's a big difference. Do you know what I mean? That's like saying that you're going to get 100 units of currency. It could be 100 times $100 notes, or it could be 100 5-cent pieces. There is a big difference. I always say, when the AFL say a second rounder or a team say a second rounder, when a plumber, if you've ever called an emergency plumber, and no offense to Australian plumbers out there, they are shithouse, right? With time. They will say, oh, yeah, mate, I'll be there with you sometime in the morning. And then 5 minutes to 5, they turn up. That's what that is. It's when someone says at some point today. So I think it'll be 41. I think Carlton might ask for more. They might ask for that. But I think 41, if you watch my Zac Fisher and Paddy Dalfish route video, I actually made pick 41 be valuable with my trade. I don't know if Black Dog's done it. We'll test him. Black Dog, did you watch your good mates video today?
I have watched your video. I believe you on trade. Did you on trade it for Hollands? I can't remember.
Hey, he did.
Yeah, look, I think potentially that three-way trade makes sense. I think Zac Fisher's a walk-up start. They're talking about him as a defender, and for small defenders, North Melbourne are relatively thin. Particularly with the various delistings they've already done. So Luke McDonald, Sheasel, Zac Fisher, that's probably your halfback rotations. They don't have any key defenders, so it might be their actual halfback line. Who knows? But he's a walk-up start. He's good fit. He's played 100-odd games over the journey. A similar player who's got traded. I'm just looking through past trades to get some sort of value. Bernie Vince had played 100 games when he was traded to Melbourne. That was for he had played 100 games for Melbourne at the time. That was a second round pick at the time. It was 23. So I think particularly for guys this age, for that sort of games experience, a second round makes sense. I'm with you. It's going to be a back end second round. We can try and talk ourselves into a dream where we get one of those future comp picks as Carlton fans, but objectively, I think if you can walk away with a pick sub 50, you're going to be happy for Zac Fisher. And I think he's going to be really good for them. I think Clarko's going to turn him into a decent little player, and I think he's going to be really solid for them.
I mean, I think he fits a need. They don't really have. I think it was a North Melbourne forum that they have the least left footers in the league. Interesting little fact. I'm not validating it. It was just from. I mean, the guy was called.
Clarko used to love lefties, wasn't that his whole thing?
I've got to say the username was Shinboner69. So take it as you will. I mean, take it as you will. I'm not validating this source. It's not Pommy verified, but I did read that. Luca asked, because he's contracted, are we allowed to say no? Yeah, pretty much. Your second part of the question, though, answers your own question. Or if the player wants to leave, that's it. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. You've sold yourself there, mate. Very, very unlikely that players request leaves in this country and don't move.
The only one I can think of was Cam McCarthy from GWS, who sat out for the year, then requested the trade at the end of the year and went to Freo and did fuck all. And I think they overpaid for that. I can't remember. I might pull that trade up while we're talking.
Yeah, spot on. With the combo picks, how do they decide how the second round are doled out? First trade gets the best. Pretty much it's at their disposal, but it usually works out that if it's like North Melbourne, it'll be before the finalists. If it's Sydney, that's why if it was the Sydney-Melbourne deal, that's why Melbourne have been bumped down, because it's not really a fair deal. So generally it goes against you how good you are and things like that. There is no set algorithm, though, to answer your question, says. It's literally, if the AFL want it to be pick 18 and it's in that band we talked about last week, it's up to them where they put it.
It's supposed to be either after your pick in that round or at the end of that round. So I pulled up that Cam McCarthy deal. GWS sent Cam McCarthy pick 7, pick 34, and pick 72, and got pick 3 back. They on-traded pick 2. That was actually a really good trade for Freo. Cam McCarthy, Griffin Logue, and Shaun Dux for pick 3, who became Hugh McCluggage up at Brisbane. So there you go. I was wrong.
Well, I mean, this is the type of deal, though, that I look and see what will it do. Do you know what I mean? What does it give back to us? Because pick 41 doesn't exactly get me excited. But like I say, if my scenario comes up and that gets you Elijah Hollands, you are replacing a player that is playing halfback that wants to play midfield with a half forward that can play midfield. There's a win for us. Interesting to see why, if he gets the midfield time, he'll get the rotation. But his manager did allude, didn't he, that he wanted to be almost a pure on-baller, and I can't see that happening at North Melbourne.
No, I don't think it will. But I think there's probably more chance of it happening there than happening here. But their midfields, I mean, you're projecting upside on a lot of guys, but their midfield's really deep. LDU, Simpkin, Wardlaw, Sheasel runs through there. They're going to have a few draft picks this year. They've kept, I think, I don't know if Liam Shields is retired or not, but they kept him last year. Like they've got quite a few players that can run through there. For me, he's clearly going to be basically a walk-up start to that back line as a general defender. So, and that's what he should be doing. He should be maximising his opportunity in that back line, using his good kicking. He can push forward and overlap. We know that as Carlton fans, but I don't think he's going to North Melbourne to be a midfielder. Maybe they do play him there. He had some good moments for the Blues as a sort of inside-y mid that pushed forward. But for mine, if he's going to play games, it's going to be in the back line at North Melbourne.
He was a midfielder, Luca, as well, as a junior. He was an inside midfielder. As you can see, though, 175-76. These guys genuinely don't play pure inside midfield. Good example is Tom Papley. You've started to see Tom Papley pinch it in the midfield now a lot more, but he was a very similar trajectory to Zac Fisher as a kid. He played across half forward and did a lot of inside midfield work. But obviously, when they come against the bigger bodies, you look at the midfielders now, they're 190 and 90 kgs. Like, they're big, big boys. But I'd say one more question, Doug, before we move on from this. Could you see anyone else? Could you see any other scenario? Could you see Carlton maybe offering something later to try and get a better value pick? Or do you think it's just going to be this, if Nick Austin, who has a history, even at the Doggies, for converting a pick for a losing player into a gain, do you think just 41 gets the job done?
Yeah, I don't think Austin's going to stuff around with it. I think Austin will know the price of Elijah Hollands, and I think that will be what we get. So if the price is, if 41's not enough for Elijah Hollands this year, and they want a future second rounder from next year, I think Austin will do a deal where there's a pick swap and he gets a better pick next year, and then on trades that. I think it'll be this or one of the future seconds with a swap. So would be my guess. I don't think it's going to get any larger. I don't think it's going to get any smaller. And we know Nick Austin's not worried about nickel and diming and, you know, being a total prick for no reason. I do want to shout out, like, Fisher kind of did his job for us while he was at the club in the middle of that awful period. 107 games for the Blues, kicked 50-odd goals. Like, he was kind of did his job. I think people probably overhyped him and expected way too much from him. I think he was drifted in and out of games, and we probably had too many of that sort of high upside David Cunningham, Zac Fisher types in the team at one time. So I wish him the best. I'll probably boo the shit out of him at games, but that's just for bants. So yeah, I don't know. I think he's a vital piece of the rebuild, and at some stage they were going to have to start leaving the club, and yeah, now's his chance to leave the club. So good on him.
Tell you what, good on him. Best of luck. And then, as yesterday, we settled on Joel Hamlin. Shout out to Damo. We talked about these guys where this looked like a logical deal for Sydney, that they were going to definitely look at that key position play. 4 games this year, Mr. Joel, 11.3 touches, 4.5 marks, 100% one-on-one ratio, though. Always been a pretty handy one-on-one player, despite his 194. Always ranks elite for his spoils. 1.5 intercept marks. He's a real stay-at-home defender, Joe. He's chosen Sydney. Looks like it's just going to be, as most unrestricted free agents, he's just going to walk across and be a swan at the end of the period. Fairly routine deal.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't make a heap of sort of sense to me. Joel Hamling, I'm just going to pull up my my free agency database, but I'm pretty sure he's one of the only free agents to have moved clubs and won a premiership. Yes, he's one of 7 players who moved clubs and won a premiership. He won one at the Dogs. I think he probably doesn't play much footy. I don't really. His camp are saying, it's to go and get more senior footy opportunities, but I think he had more chance of doing that at Freo. I suspect there's just a bit more of a pay packet. They've got like Tom McCartan, Dane Rampy, Robbie Fox, Aaron Francis, who's out of contract. Maybe this is bad news for him. They've got Lewis Malikan. So there's a few tall defenders there. Hamling's better than a couple of those if he's fit. But yeah, I'd be interested to know the actual reasoning. Maybe they're just paying a bit more than Freo were going to. But I think this is a pretty inoffensive move. Pom, by the way, there's a very good question which I thought we could answer just before we keep talking about Hamling. Luca asked it. Yeah, that's the question. Why do players have less value than the draft? Like Fisher was drafted at 26. He's probably performed to that. Why is he not worth that now if he's older and more mature? Well, my take on it, Pom, I'm interested in yours, is that you're buying upside at the draft. Fisher's probably never hit that upside, and you can probably replicate his output with a young draftee within 1 or 2 years. But also, the other thing, which we try to hammer home in this show, is that salary has a massive impact on value. I don't know, but I suspect Fisher is going to be a very well-paid player, and you'd probably rather pick 26 output coming from a player that you got in the draft and you're paying him $100,000 a year than a guy you're paying $500,000 a year. So for me, that's a big part of it. I don't know if you've got any more insight into that.
Well, I mean, if you actually look at the history of a pick 27, the stats aren't actually good. It's one of the cursed positions, but only 67 games career average. Do you know what I mean? So it's not exactly an absolute high-profile pick. So you're really looking at this position, someone who's depth, aren't you, really? I mean, they've only got 3 premiership players, Kane Johnson, Ted Richards, and Tom Sparrow, if you count it. So it's not exactly like the golden goose. But what I would say is, around that pick in the draft, like Dog says, it's upside versus what you're paying. So you are paying a kid 100K, 150K, or you're paying him 300, 350K. And it's the now versus the now type scenario. So I think it's an interesting one. Joel Hamlin is like another example of that. They are in a situation where they're not going to get anything for him because he's 30 years old. But this is where it flips around. It's probably better playing Joel Hamlin 200, 300K because he's a key position player. So he's definitely going to play if his body's right. As opposed to if you went in the draft around this pick, which you'd say would be a 3rd, 4th rounder for Joel Hamlin if you were trading for him. You're probably not finding a kid in the draft ready to play a key position till 2026. So it's that. And like T Mello, a good friend of the channel, says, 4th club, Joel Hamlin's had more clubs than, Leo DiCaprio, 1st row of a Victoria's Secret. Fucking
pays to be tall, Pom. It pays to be tall.
Pays to be tall. It pays to be tall. But definitely, this is one of them things. To answer your question about Zac Fisher, you very rarely, it's a bit like a car. You very rarely retain the value when you sell your car, unless it's a vintage car. So do you know what I mean? Like, you're buying secondhand goods. The minute Carlton took Zac Fisher out of the showroom floor, he depreciated in value, and that's it.
That's a good point. Like, once the players in the club once the second their name's called out, the number that's next to their name doesn't actually matter. There is some exceptions to that rule, like a Jason Horne-Francis probably retained his pick 1 value, but that's very rare because as soon as you're in that environment and you're competing against actual athletes and actual mature bodies, if you're not up to standard, they don't give a shit what pick you were taking. Like it's irrelevant, to be honest.
Mate, spot on.
It's a good question.
John, he played for Geelong as well, drafted
He did
in the 30s by Geelong Football Club. I believe when Dacos was taken, the max you could play 1 to 5 was 150. Then it went to 120. Then it went to 100, which is the minimum payment for a professional footballer outside of the first 2 rounds. Then it's like 80k is the least they can pay. Like they're in a real tough financial position. 80k to sit on the bench and play 4 VFL games a year must be really tough.
Yeah, it must be tough. The other thing is obviously they can extend you pretty early in your career, and you know you're on 100k, but actually you're on a deal worth $1 million. So if you're good, it all evens out. But in real sports, it's like hard capped how much you can earn depending on where you draft, and it's hard capped on how much you can get like in an extension. So yeah, in real leagues, you would very much know exactly how much people are getting paid, and they would know. And yeah. Anyway, much easier to.
I do believe the re-signing when he re-signed in August was 250 for the remainder of his 2-year deal, 250k,
and then $1 billion after that.
No, and then I believe that the next 4 years is only 500, but there is some extensions on the back of that. So you'd imagine by 6 years' time that would take him to 24. He's probably looking at $1 million. I mean, he'll already be a millionaire.
And he'll be a free agent at the end of 2029, which is when his deal goes through, which is crazy. So he'll be 26 or whatever. He will get all of the money. He will get all of the money.
Mate, he'll get shit. I mean, he's not doing bad. I mean, we're talking about it like he's been underpaid. $250,000 at 18 when you can still go around to your Mars for a cup of tea and a Horlicks. Fuck me. Jesus. Like, God Christ. If he's struggling now, Jesus Christ, wait till he has babies. But here we go. Tom Fullerton. We've got some exciting ones to finish. There's 2 more after this. Tom Fullerton, 19 career games. This isn't last year. This is career games. Melbourne fans, Owen, don't get excited, thinking, fuck, he's played 19 games this year. 24 years old, 200 centimetres, 1.8 marks, 5.1 hit-outs. Been played a lot, more forward ruck in the seniors. VFL, though, his numbers are pretty impressive at state football, and definitely a player that, if you look at how Brisbane play, they don't really look at that ruck forward role, do they? They're quite happy with Oscar McKerney being number 1 ruck, and then they pinch hit that through Danaher, Hitwood, Dave from the Dog and Duck. Goes to Melbourne, probably the first time a ruckman has nominated Melbourne, and what he does is literally what he's going to do at Melbourne.
I guess the potential upside is that he can play as a key forward target that pinch hits in the ruck. I think that's probably what he's banking on to get ahead of your Tom McDonalds and your Ben Browns and your Harrison Petties and your, I don't know, whatever other spuds they play in the forward line over there. I guess that's the upside for him. But yeah, they need ruck depth. They need developing ruck depth. If he's going there expecting to play in the ruck, he's kidding himself. How many ruckmen have done this now? Brodie Grundy, Braden Pruce. Stop going and playing behind Max Gawn. Yes, at some stage he'll get injured, or need to retire. But gee whiz, you're just wasting your time. But if they're going to play him in sort of a similar way to like an Ivan Soldo or something like that and split ruck and forward time, then yeah, I think Tom Fullerton is a logical sort of addition to that side. Who knows if he can step up to the level when he's required to, but I think it's a very cost efficient sort of acquisition for Melbourne.
I actually think, to answer Owen's question, he will actually play a few games. I could see 10, 15 games, exactly like Let Dog says, playing that forward role. I actually think when you look at him in VFL, I did see him play against Carlton that game, and I think he had 1 goal. And then he went up against a real strong North Melbourne side the next game, and he absolutely tore that apart. But this year, he's been playing a lot more forward in the VFL and kind of been the forward rock relief, which I think is what Melbourne are looking for. I think they tried it with Grundy. It didn't work. This guy is more in his purview of being a forward rock. I actually really like this. So I actually think it helps. And you've got JVR, Van Ruwen. You don't want him in the ruck. Bailey Fritsch is probably too small to be in a ruck. This makes a sensible deal. And I actually think he might be one of these guys that, when we talk about bargain buy, Akers won it by Fleming and Straight this year. I reckon this one could be the bargain buy.
Yeah, I think it's got that scope to it. He fits a need. We saw them playing in the finals. Tom McDonald as that forward ruck. It didn't work. We saw them playing Joel Smith as a key position forward. He kicked a few goals against the Blues, but I don't think that's a long-term solution. Same with Harrison Petty. I don't think that's a long-term solution. So, yeah, and he's young enough that there's upside in his game, and I think it's just a really solid acquisition. I don't expect him, if he could average his one goal, a few hit outs, a couple of marks a game, I think that's doing his job.
Matt, I think this is a pretty good deal for Melbourne. These are the budget deals I like. Do you know what I mean? Because they're giving a third is what they're looking for. Third, you ain't getting anything better in the draft than this. And the hard work's been done at 24 years old. You know what I mean? He's done the teething issues. He's shown in the limited AFL game time that he doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. He can compete. I reckon it's going to be a pretty good little deal.
Yeah, me too. I like it.
Then the big one. If you watched yesterday, me and Damo, we said we thought there was some twists and turns coming in the AFL draft and trade period coming up. And here it is. Taylor Adams, vice captain of Collingwood Football Club, has toured the facilities today. It has been announced at Sydney. And Sydney look primed to launch a bid for him. Now, me and Letdog covered Sydney. We covered Sydney last night. We said they definitely, since Kennedy has left, have lacked that enforcer. They've got the class. They've got the skill. They probably lack that little bit of grit and fight. And Taylor Adams, in fairness, is grit and determination. 23 games this year, 18.4 disposals, 4.6 tackles, 3.7 clearances, just under a goal a game, 30 years old, very experienced if he can get his body right. The AFL are reported it could be any pick between the first and the second. Now, I don't think it'll be a first, but I could see, knowing how the AFL works, you could easily see some miraculous pick swap. I think it'll be a mid-second if I was a betting man. But this looks like a good little bit of business, because we did say, Letdog, you and me, not saying blowing our own trumpet, but Collingwood may look at trading some of their senior statesmen out to try and bribe he's a flag winner. This could win you a flag.
Yeah, we did say that. We did say some of their older players might look to move them on. We did say that Sydney probably need another inside mid. Luke Parker aging, Callum Mills hasn't been great in that. Well, when he's really good in that role, he's really good. But when he's not, he goes missing and they play him at full back or on a wing. And obviously he's now injured. So we talked about it when Clayton Oliver was getting mentioned. I'm going to try and quickly pull up who we had as targets for them when we did their review. But Taylor Adams fits it. Now, if I was Sydney, I wouldn't want to pay a first or a second for him, just because his availability is never quite there. He's always getting injured. He's always got niggles. And he's aging as well. But it's kind of a roll at the dice. So I don't know if you have his age right in front of you. I do, 30. It's a roll of the dice. Does Sydney still think they're in the window? They must. And he does tick a box for him. He's going to be on a hell of a lot of money. I wouldn't, unless Collingwood are going to pay some of that salary, I probably wouldn't want to give up a second. But I think you're right. I think it'll end up in the same way that Zac Fisher's worth a second. I think it'll be a pick in the late 30s, mid 40s, probably.
If I was a betting man, I earmark pick 31. Which
bumps out to probably 35, 36, right?
And I think dependent on how the trades go, it could even be 23 that would bump out to 28. Do you know what I mean? So I agree. Do you know what I mean? Mag Gondolfo, this is a really interesting one. This is something that me and Terry actually talked about today on the phone. I'm surprised Carlton haven't sniffed Kennedy around, knowing Adelaide came out so strongly. When the Clayton Oliver talk was out, they were saying they were looking for someone that fits the age profile of that mid to late 20s who was an inside bull. And they discussed Rory Sloane, saying that since his injury, they can't play him purely on the ball. So they were looking to give up assets to try and get that in. And I was thinking Matt Kennedy's probably around that 25th best player at Carlton, 24th, probably waiting for an injury. If the offer's pretty good, yeah, it could be one of them ones that you do sniff out, not to sell, but to ascertain the value now, if people are looking to make that window. And I think Taylor Adams may be the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great shout on Matt Kennedy from a Carlton perspective. He's not in their top. He's probably their 5th or 6th best midfielder. Cripps, Walsh, Hewitt, Chera, all ahead of him. Doherty's played in the mids. Akers has gone inside at times. We've seen him rotate a bunch of guys through, and they're looking at Elijah Holland. So if I'm Matt Kennedy, I'm probably, just from a pure football perspective, I'm probably looking at if there's another opportunity to be a starting player in the same way that Setterfield did last year. The thing with the Blues, it's a weird mix, and I don't want to talk too much about the Blues in this segment, but their core's pretty locked in for the next few years. Even with Paddy Cripps getting older, he's going to play until he's dead. So a Matt Kennedy, if you are the one on the outside, it's going to be very hard to get back in barring injuries. So I think he'd be the perfect player to go to another club. And he wouldn't be a superstar, but we know that he's been really, really serviceable for us as an inside mid. If there was an opportunity at a Sydney or an Adelaide, I think he probably should look at it. And I think he'd net you sort of similar value probably, because he's going to cost way less in terms of salary, but provide the same output as a Taylor Adams. I think
the most underappreciated footballers in the league are inside bulls, but the most overappreciated are inside bulls. And at the trade table, you always get a fair whack for them, even though no one fucking gives them any credit. But yeah, Luke, I mean, this is one of them, isn't it, where just quickly chat, off topic. Do you think that if you've played more than 5 games, you should get the medal? Because I actually think Taylor Adams, in my opinion, is a Premiership player, even though he missed the final. But playing 23 games in the Premiership, you are a Premiership player, in my opinion.
Keep it real simple for you. Let the clubs choose who they give it to, be that staff or players. That's what the NBA does, because obviously the AFL is going to introduce a mid-season trade period potentially this year. In the NBA, if you were on the list up until the trade deadline, they move you, they still will sometimes give a ring to that player. So just I've seen a lot of people trying to make up rules. Oh, if you've played 5 games, if you played 10 games, if you played a final, just let the clubs make the call. And then the players as well, they can choose to say no. If they don't think they, earned it, they can say no. So just let the clubs choose. Who cares about anything else? We overthink things.
Mate, I said it on the Jumper Punch the other night. In the Premier League, we only give the medals to the players playing that day, but then the club get a box of medals and they hand them out to all the playing group, the staff, anyone who meets the criteria. And in the UK, we have a criteria, but the staff, they have no criteria. Do you know what I mean? They get their medals because everyone is part of the thing. So I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's like there was someone in the comments the other day going, "Oh, if we give 100 medals out, we'll be there 2 days." And I'm like,
you don't have to do it at the ground.
What bit? Do you know what I mean? Just still do the medal ceremony, but then they get a box to give. Whatever. Yeah, Taylor Adams, I think it's a good deal. It's a good deal. And we finish with, fucking hell, this one's an exciting one, isn't it? Big on the one, Richmond's Rook. Only the one AFL game, 6 disposals, 2 tackles, no clearances, no goals. North Melbourne are looking to talent acquire this gentleman. It won't cost anything. It's a free hit. What are we thinking?
I mean, you're right. It's a free hit. It'd be a swap of fifths or one of those pretend deals. I don't think he's a free agent. I haven't checked. But, I mean, do they see him as a forward more than a ruck, North? Is that the interest? Do they think he could become a project forward? Because I'm looking at their rucks. They got Cherry, Hamish Free, they just extended yesterday. And I guess Callum Coleman Jones. I think he's kind of a ruck forward. So is this like just trying to get a depth sort of key forward? What's the goal here?
It's a real interesting one, this one, because I went all the way to speak to a good mate of mine. He's a Richmond man. He spends a lot of time covering Richmond, and asked him what the haps was, because I did see him a couple of times in the VFL when he was coming against teams. And I've got to say, all due respect to him, I didn't look at him and go, oh, fucking hell, this guy looks good. So he falls under the unrestricted free agent rule. Says just to ask you, so, a bit like we were talking about, he's been delisted before, then re-picked up. So it would be one of them deals where it's just the contract, the club let him walk, or they might do what we did with Nick Newman. We'll give you a throwaway pick that we won't lose. Good example would be the Hamlin deal. Sydney probably have one too many picks, so they could maybe offer the pick 60 to compensate them, because he won't be falling under any compensation. This guy won't. But I was speaking to the guy at Richmond, and he said, interesting enough, he started in the ruck for the VFL and looked really tasty this year for them. They were really impressed. Then they moved him forward. He played against GWS and he had 2 goals, 7. Evidently couldn't hit a cow's ass with a banjo. But then they moved him down back, and they were saying that there was some elements, because he averaged just under 6 marks since that move down the back, 3 intercept. That's what they were looking at. So we were talking about key defenders. They don't have any at North. Looks like we've unlocked the reason why. And that's an exclusive. No one's talked about that in the AFL media. So shout out to my mate Jackie, who sent me that. I really appreciate that. But he said he thinks that will be it. The quick replacement. He's big. Not AFL's experience, but Clarkson's coached some pretty good defenders.
Well, they need to do something, because here's my list of key defenders that North Melbourne has available to them. Aiden Core, and that's it. So they need to find some way to stock up back there. I don't mind that. And by the way, partially the reason that they can we want players to be able to move as like delisted free agents or whatever, or previously been delisted, you can move as a free agent. So you don't have the Reece Palmer situation where Carlton traded pick 135 for him. I think that's the latest pick ever traded for a player. So it's just to take that nonsense out of it.
Should be an interesting one. But yeah, I really do like this one. I like, once I learned that, because I was thinking, they've got a fuckload of ruck forwards. Then when I spoke to him, he covers the VFL at length, saying that he was really impressive down the back. And he was like, it looks like that's where his home is. So makes sense. Maybe Clarkson is going to pull off a shrewd move here, but that, unfortunately, this might be the shortest show we've ever done. That is literally your first day of AFL free agency.
Well, between this show and last night's show, they should have a solid 23 and a half hours to watch. So that's good. And give them half an hour back to rest and recuperate. And we'll be back presumably on Monday, and hopefully, because we know a lot of deals, they can't officially go through over the weekend. We know a lot of deals generally get done over the first weekend. A lot of those free agency signings happen the first day back after the first weekend. So yeah, I'm hoping we'll have some Ben Mackay's and some stuff like that. This weekend that they do work, but very rarely do they get put through. We'll be back Monday though to recap anything that goes through the weekend. Tune in tonight, 8:30. Me, Faz. I've assembled a dream team tonight. Me, Faz, Paolo,
Adrian from the Weekend Grill, and Ali Stamanakos. I've had a crack there from Blue Abroad fame. He's coming on and we're going to discuss the best EPL teams of all time. So stay tuned for that. Me and Let Dog will be back Monday, though. Stay tuned over the weekend. I'll cover any shit that happens. Peace, love. See you soon.